Hey, and welcome to section 3 for this course, where we're going to be building a game called Mars Marine. Unlike the previous sections where we create a project from scratch, you're going to be downloading an Unreal Engine 4 project that I've set up that contains a lot of art and audio content that we can use to build this game. But don't worry, there's no blueprints or gameplay built into it. We'll be building everything from scratch within this project. This is just so we have access to a lot of content to start developing the project with. So in order to download this project, you're going to want to check the resources for this lecture to download it. You'll find a zip file named marsmarine_ue4project.zip. So go ahead and download this file now, and while you wait for it to download, here's a sneak peek at what we're going to be building in this section.
Mayday, Mayday! Marine Squad Victor Foxtrot requesting immediate support in Sector 3. Surrounded by hostiles and taking heavy casualties. We need more firepower down here.
Okay, so Mars Marine, the game we're going to be building is a top-down wave-based shooter. The objective for the player is to survive as many waves as possible against some aliens. Now, once you have your project downloaded, you should have a zip file. Make sure that you place this file somewhere on your machine that you're happy with, and then we can extract the file or unzip it by right-clicking it and hitting either extract or unzip depending on your machine. Now once you do this, you should notice a few more folders in your directory and you should see this marsmarine.u project. Now to launch the project, all we have to do is double click on this file to launch it. You'll only have to launch it once from here in this folder, and the rest of the time you'll be able to launch this from the Epic Games launcher. Now I'm still developing this course in Unreal Engine 4.20, but if you don't want to follow along in this version of the engine, you can always switch the engine version for this project by right-clicking on this file and selecting Switch Engine Version. Then you can select whichever version of the engine you want to use, then hit OK and you can launch it. So let's do this now. Let's boot up this project for the first time. When we do this, we should see the splash screen for our project while it loads. Now, when the project opens for the first time, you might see that it says compiling shaders. So this means that Unreal is just taking its time to load the materials for the level. So you'll have to wait until this completes. And you also might see that it says new plugins available. You can just hit dismiss to get rid of this message, as we're not going to be using any plugins. So this is our project now open and ready for us to start developing. You'll notice that the content browser is full of assets ready for us to start using. And we're going to be jumping straight into setting up our game mode and the start of our player character class. Okay, so with your project loaded up, you'll be in a level just called Mars, as this is set as the default level that the editor and the game will launch. This level is just basically going to be a small arena. Later on in this section, we'll be taking a look at restricting the player character so they can't leave this small arena area. Now talking about the player character, let's jump straight in and take a look at how we can start developing our Blueprint character class. Inside the content browser, let's create a new folder called Blueprints. Now remember, you can change the color of your folders to set them apart from other folders in the content browser. So let's change this folder just to be a bluish color, just to set it apart from all these other folders here. Now inside this folder, let's create another new folder called Pawns. Now you're probably wondering why I've named it Pawns, but we'll see why in a second, but we're going to create our character class inside here. Let's right click in the content browser and let's come up to Blueprint class to create a new Blueprint class, and we started off this course by working with actors. Then we moved into working with pawns, but in this section we're going to be working with the character class, and it says here that a character is a type of pawn that includes the ability to walk around. So a character actually is a pawn. It can still be possessed and unpossessed, so we can take control of it just like any other pawn. However, the difference about this character class is that it already comes with components built into it that makes it perfect for humanoid-like characters. It actually extends the pawn class. So this is what we're going to use to develop our player character. So what shall we name this? Well, the player character for our game is going to be a Marine on Mars. So let's name this asset BP for blueprint underscore Marine. And remember, we have to use the underscore because Unreal doesn't allow us to name assets with spaces. Now, before we open up this blueprint class, we want to make sure that we spawn in as this character when we play the game, because at the moment, if we were to hit play, we would just spawn in as Unreal's default pawn that just floats around the level. So your challenge right now is to create a Blueprints game mode for Mars Marine. You might want to put this in its own folder too. And once you've created your game mode, assign the default pawn class to be the Marine character class we've just created. And then for the final step, make sure to assign the game mode as the default game mode for the project. And you can do this within the project settings. So pause here to create and set up the game mode. So in my Blueprints folder, I'm going to create a new folder called Game Mode. And within this folder, I'm going to right click and create a new Blueprint class, and I'm going to select the Game Mode. So we're going to call our Blueprint game mode BP underscore Mars Marine underscore game mode, something like this, just so we know it's a game mode linked to our game. Now if we open up this game mode, we can see on the details panel that we can assign a default pawn class. Now we want to change this from Unreal's default pawn to our Marine blueprint we've just created. We can hit compile and save to save the asset, and we can close out of this now. Now this still doesn't change much yet because we haven't assigned this game mode. We want this game mode to be the default game mode across every level in our project. So to do this, we are going to come up to Edit and then Project Settings. And then on the project settings, we're going to come to Maps and Modes, and here is where we can change the default game mode. We're going to change it to the BP Mars Marine game mode we just created. And we can also see here that Mars is the default map for the editor and also a packaged game. Now, even though we've done this, if we close the project settings and come and hit play and start to play the game, we still play as the default pawn. So why is this? Well, if we come up to settings and then world settings, you can actually override the game mode for each level. And it's still currently set as Unreal's default game mode, so let's change this to our Mars Marine game mode. I just wanted to make it clear that even though we set a default game mode for our project, we can have different game modes for different levels. Now you'll notice that if you hit play, that we can no longer move around our level, but this is expected because we are now playing as our Marine character blueprint, and this doesn't have any logic set up yet for our movement. Let's jump out of the game by hitting escape, and let's come back to our blueprints folder, and then inside the pawns folder to open our blueprint Marine character. In the viewport for our character blueprint, we see a couple of things here. We see this capsule-like shape, and we also see an arrow. If we look over to the components section, we can see that the root component is a capsule component. This is going to be used for colliding with objects in the world. We also see an arrow component. This is just to help us see the forward-facing direction of the character in the editor. We won't actually see this during gameplay. And we also have a mesh component, which can be used for assigning a character mesh. And the big thing here is that we have this character movements component. This character movement component contains really quite a lot of logic that handles humanoid character movement, as well as properties for changing the character's movement speed, the character's jump height, and it even applies gravity to the capsule component. When we start adding movement input to the character movement component is going to move the capsule components. It controls the root components for us. Now you'll notice that the components all say inherited by them. This is simply because when we create a new blueprint character class, we are inheriting from Unreal's character. We are creating a child of it to extend it by implementing our own logic and components. Now in the next lesson, we're going to start working with these components by assigning a character mesh as well as setting up our player camera. So we're going to wrap up this lesson here, and when you're ready, I'll see you in the next one.